The prairie wind howled low and cold, dragging dust and silence across a once bustling outpost where even the ghosts had grown weary of whispering. A sunburnt saloon sign swung on rusted hinges, creaking with each gust like it was moaning in pain. The town of Clayridge, if you could still call it that, was mostly splinters and ash now, picked clean by raiders, time, and whatever godforsaken thing lived in the bones of forgotten places. Down the main street came a man, half-slouched in the saddle, coat flapping, boots caked with dried blood and trail dust. The mare beneath him limped, favoring its left foreleg, ribs showing, each breath like dragging a plow uphill. The man wasn't much better. Colt McCollin. Once a Union scout with a reputation for sharp eyes and sharper decisions. Now, a specter on horseback with a torn shoulder and a heart that hadn't beat right in years. He wasn't old, not by age, but war, real war, didn't measure in birthdays. It carved time into your bones and took payment in people you failed to save. His fingers trembled on the reins. Not from fear. He hadn't felt fear since Antietam. No, this was something worse. What came after you lost the right to feel anything at all. Colt pulled up beside the dried-up well in the town center. His throat was parched. Hadn't drunk properly in 2 days. The last river was bitter with ash from a burned village. Another one Harrow's boys had cleared in the name of peace. He slid from the saddle, nearly buckling as his boots hit the dirt. A sharp bolt of pain lanced through his side. Gunshot wound. 2 days old. Bullet passed clean but left fire in its wake. No time to patch it proper. Too many eyes looking for him. Too many wrongs piled on his name. He staggered toward the well, until a voice, calm and steady, cut through the dust. "I wouldn't drink that." Colt froze, hand on the grip of his revolver. The voice was a woman's. Low, not fearful, not hostile. Just real. He turned, slow, careful, squinting through the glare of sunlight bouncing off broken glass. She stood beneath the saloon's overhang, crouched beside a small black horse with a twisted ankle. Her hands worked quick and sure, wrapping its leg with strips of soaked linen. Her hair was long, braided in a Lakota pattern, jet black with threads of gray near the temples. Her eyes, dark and wide-set, met his without flinching. "I boiled what I could. But the well's gone bad," she said. "Iron taste. Might be something dead in there." He didn't answer. Not yet. His breath came rough and shallow. Blood soaked through his coat at the shoulder. She noticed it. He saw her eyes flick down, then back up, still steady. "I don't want trouble," she said, standing slowly. Colt exhaled through his nose and lowered his hand from the revolver. "I don't have enough blood left to make trouble." He took a shaky step forward, then crumpled. Blackness. Heat. Memories. A child's scream under cannon fire. The sound of horses breaking through tents. Orders shouted over the roar of burning wood. And the silence that always came after. When Colt opened his eyes, the ceiling above him was rough timber, new, not rotted. He blinked against the dim orange light flickering on the walls. A fire crackled nearby. His coat had been removed. His shoulder cleaned and wrapped. He sat up too fast. "Don't." The woman knelt by the fire, grinding herbs in a stone bowl. She didn't look at him when she spoke. "You tore it worse when you fell. Took me time to stop the bleeding." Colt eyed her. "You the one patched me?" "I did." "Why?" She finally looked up. "Because I know what war does. And because you looked like you were ready to die." A pause. But something in you kept walking. Colt's eyes narrowed. "You Lakota?" She nodded once. He didn't move. He didn't reach for a weapon. But the tension in the room could have stopped a heartbeat. "You know who I am? I know your face. Saw your poster last week. Bounty's high. But I also know the kind of wound that don't come from being bad. Just broken." She set the bowl aside, stood, and walked to the door. "You can stay until you can walk. After that, we both go our ways." "Name?" he asked, voice rough. She glanced back. "Wyan." He watched her silhouette disappear against the dying light outside. The next morning, he was gone. But he hadn't gotten far. 2 miles down the old cattle path, Colt's horse gave out. The mare whinnied and dropped to one knee. Colt dismounted, cradled her neck, whispering something nobody else would ever hear. He didn't shoot her. Didn't have it in him. He walked back. Wyan met him at the edge of town with a look that said everything she needed to. "You stubborn, war-bit fool," she muttered. He didn't argue. The next few days were a blur of slow healing, short words, and heavy silence. Wyan wasn't soft. She didn't fuss. But her touch, when redressing the wound, was steady as stone. Sometimes Colt caught her staring at the horizon at night, as if waiting for something, or someone, to return. On the 5th day, she handed him his coat. "You can ride. You should ride." He didn't move. "I owe you." "No one owes me." "Not anymore." But as he turned toward the door, something changed. The sound of hooves. Not one. Several. Then, a voice shouting his name. "McCollin! You in there? Come out with your hands up." Colt went stiff. That voice. "Jesse Carver," he muttered. "Who?" "Ex-scout. Now bounty man. He'll burn the town to ash just to be sure." Wyan reached for the rifle above her hearth. "Then we don't let him." Colt stared at her. "You're not part of this." She chambered around. Too late. They crept to the edge of the saloon, peering through broken slats. 3 men on horseback. Carver, mustached and smug. 2 others, one wiry, one thick-necked. All armed. Colt's face was plastered on a crumpled poster in Carver's hand. Colt hissed. "We can't face 'em head-on." "Then we don't," Wyan replied. She slipped around the back, gesturing for him to wait. 10 minutes passed. Gunshots cracked the air. Then silence. Colt bolted out, gun drawn, only to find Carver's 2 men down. One groaning with a dart in his thigh. The other face first in the dirt. Wyan stood behind Carver with his own rifle pressed to his neck. "Drop it," she said. Carver sneered. "You got no idea who you're helping, squaw." Colt's pistol barked once. Carver went down with a scream, bullet through the hand. Colt stepped forward. Eyes burning. "You talk to her like that again, I'll aim higher." Wyan said nothing, but she didn't need to. They left the bodies where they fell. Night came fast. Colt stared into the fire as if it might show him something he didn't already know. "I was part of the last push through the North Plains," he said, quietly. "We called it a peace march. It was a slaughter." Wyan didn't look away. "I saw a boy, maybe 10, shot in the back trying to run. I didn't pull the trigger. But I didn't stop it neither." He waited for her judgment. It didn't come. "Instead," she said, "my brother was 10 when soldiers came to our camp. I survived by hiding beneath a dead pony." The fire crackled. Colt looked at her, finally. "Why help me?" Wyan answered slowly. "Because war don't just kill people. It kills the soul. But I think yours is still in there. Somewhere." He said nothing for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "I want to make it right." "You can't," she said. Another silence. "But you can stop running." Outside, the wind stirred the ashes of a dead town. Inside, 2 broken souls sat across from each other, no longer strangers, not yet healed, but changed. The flames danced. The stars blinked awake. And far off in the distance, another rider crested a ridge. Watching. Waiting. And ready to bring the past screaming back. The woods were quiet, but it was the wrong kind of quiet, the kind that made a man's instincts crawl up the back of his neck and whisper warnings in his ear. Colt walked a half-step behind Wyan as they weaved between pine and ash trees, leaves crunching beneath their boots. She moved with the kind of grace born from years of hunting, gathering, and surviving. Colt's steps were heavier, uneven from the wound still healing under his ribs. They had left Claridge behind at first light. Colt didn't argue. Too many memories, too much blood, and the promise of more if they stayed. Carver would live, missing fingers, sure, but alive enough to call down worse men. The bounty on Colt's head wasn't just for desertion. It was personal for some. Too many skeletons walked behind him now. Some wore blue. Some wore feathers. Wyan hadn't said much that morning. She'd handed him dried meat, a flask of pine tea, and a simple look. We ride or we rot. He hadn't been sure which fate he preferred. But he rode. Now, several miles out, the woods closed in tighter. The air smelled of damp moss and fire smoke, old, faded. Wyan paused near a creek, knelt, and dipped her fingers into the water. Still warm, she murmured. Colt raised an eyebrow. From the sun. From hooves, she said, standing. A day old at most. 5, maybe 6 riders passed through here. Not bounty men. He studied the tracks where she pointed, shallow, swift-moving, and deliberate. No dragging. No scouting side paths. Lakota? She nodded. My brother's band. Or what's left of it. Colt chewed the inside of his cheek. They headed north? Wyan's face shifted. Not quite a wince. Not quite a frown. Yes. He didn't press. But she hadn't said her brother was alive. Just out there. They pushed forward. By late afternoon, the sun bled between trees like molten copper. Colt's breath grew heavier. He didn't complain, but Wyan noticed. She stopped at a fallen tree and gestured. Sit. I'm fine. You're bleeding again. He sat. Wyan knelt beside him, tugging the coat aside, fingers deft. The bandage was red at the edges. She peeled it back carefully, lips pressed tight. The wound had opened slightly, not bad, but enough to slow him down. Reckon you could just leave me here, Colt muttered. Plenty of trees for shade. A decent grave. You think I'd dig for you? She snapped. You're heavier than you look. He smirked despite himself. She applied a fresh poultice. The herbs stung sharp, pine resin and ghost root. I've had worse, he said, grimacing. I haven't, she replied softly. But I've seen it. My brother once took a bullet through the thigh. Yanked it out with a flint knife. Didn't scream until he knew I was out of earshot. Sounds tougher than me. He is. She tied the bandage, her fingers brushing his ribs. His breath hitched, not from pain but something else. Something he hadn't felt in years. He looked at her face, focused, determined, tired. There was a sadness in her eyes, but no bitterness. Just the kind of loss that had long since stopped screaming and settled into silence. They moved again as the light dimmed. Shadows stretched across the ground, long and sharp. Birds quieted. Somewhere ahead, a branch snapped. Colt stopped. Wyan froze beside him. Another snap. Then a voice. Male. Rough. Laughing. They ducked behind a ridge. Colt peeked over. 3 men. Not Lakota. Not bounty either. Bandits. The kind that circled burned-out towns like buzzard. Their horses were tethered near a small fire. One man held a bottle, gesturing wildly. Another cleaned his rifle. The third, bigger, uglier, with a scar down one eye, was dragging something from a saddlebag. A scalp. Colt's blood went ice-cold. Wyan's face was stone. Raiders, she whispered. They've been hunting the scattered camps. Colt didn't hesitate. We hit him. You'll bleed out. Then you shoot. She didn't argue. They split. Colt moved left, flanking. Wyan crept up the right, keeping low, her blade drawn, not a soldier's knife but a hunting one, curved and elegant. Colt waited until one of the men turned his back, then fired. The bandit crumpled without a sound. The second spun, shouting. Colt took a hit to the shoulder of his coat, not flesh. He rolled behind a tree as the third drew. Wyan moved like wind. One blink, nothing. Next blink. The big one was on his knees, her blade at his throat. Drop it, she hissed. He spat. Filthy savage. Colt stepped forward, revolver aimed. Say that again. The man sneered. Colt fired into the dirt an inch from his boot. The man talked. They learned enough. Major Harrow was still running his personal campaign through the Western Territories, cleaning up threats, which mostly meant Lakota families trying to stay out of the warpath. He paid mercenaries now. Less official eyes, more brutal hands. The bandits were just one group of many. There'd been a raid 3 days prior, burned a half-hidden camp along Eagle Ridge. Wyann's hands trembled slightly as she sheathed her blade. My brother's camp was near Eagle Ridge, she said. Colt helped her onto one of the horses. He didn't ask if she needed time. There wasn't time to give. They rode through the night. The moon was thin. The wind smelled of ash. By dawn, they crested a hill and froze. The camp was there. Or what was left of it. Charred tents. Ash in place of furs. Scattered bones, blackened pots, trampled prayers painted on hides now split open. Wyann dismounted. Her legs almost buckled. Colt walked beside her in silence. There were no survivors. No fire. No birdsong. She knelt beside a figure, small, burned beyond recognition. Beside it, a charm made of carved wood and eagle feather. "My nephew," she whispered. He was 6. Colt looked away. Wyann picked up a stone. Her hand bled from gripping it too hard. She didn't seem to notice. She stood slowly. Her face wasn't empty. It was full of fire, of grief, of something ancient and furious. "They'll pay." Colt nodded. "They will." She turned to him. "You know where Harrow is, don't you?" He hesitated. "I do." "How?" Colt looked past her, past the ruins, toward the far mountain ridges. His voice dropped low. "Because I used to ride with him." Her eyes narrowed. "I followed orders," he continued, "till I couldn't. The last village, we were told they were hiding weapons. There were only women and children." Wyann stared. "I tried to stop it. Got thrown from my horse. They left me for dead." She looked down at her nephew's charm, then back at Colt. "You should be dead," she said. "I know." And still, she didn't kill him. Instead, she walked past him and picked up a burnt spear shaft. "We ride east," she said. "If Harrow's still in the lowlands, that's where he'll be watching. Gathering for another push. We won't make it far. They'll be expecting scouts." She turned. "Then we don't ride in as scouts." Colt raised a brow. She smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was sharp. "We ride in as ghosts." They spent that evening in a cave by a stream. The horses drank. Wyann sat with her back against the stone, cleaning blood from her fingers. Colt stared into the fire again, watching the flames lick higher and higher. He thought of his brother. Thought of the war. Thought of the men who'd laughed as they lit torches. Thought of how long he'd been running from a name that still belonged to him. He looked at Wyann. She was sharpening her blade. Her face illuminated by firelight. Her eyes reflecting it. Not afraid. Not broken. Just ready. He spoke without thinking. "Why didn't you kill me when I told you the truth?" She didn't pause. "Because death is easy." She looked up, eyes meeting his. "And I don't give easy." The fire cracked. Outside, an owl called. Far off in the distance, unseen but known, something darker moved through the trees. The past was circling. But the drifter had stopped running. And the healer had started hunting. Tomorrow they would ride toward the storm. Together. And someone, maybe everyone, was going to bleed. The plains stretched wide beneath a storm-heavy sky, and thunder growled low, distant but closing in. Colt rode with a grim set to his jaw. His coat darkened from the weight of wet air and ash, one hand near his holster, always. Wyann rode beside him, face streaked with wind and grit, her braids trailing like war banners in the breeze. They said nothing for hours. Words were starting to feel too small anyway. They traveled eastward, past the burned ruins of other camps, always too late to change anything. Fire-blackened wagons. Shattered dolls. Trampled corn. Each place told a story without speaking. And each story stoked something hotter than blood in Wyann's chest. They stopped once. At a ravine with a narrow bridge of stone and old wood, barely strong enough to carry a horse. Wyann dismounted and ran her fingers across the ground. "Fresh," she murmured. "Riders passed this morning." Colt checked the tracks. 2 horses. Both light-footed. Not scouts. No, she said. Messengers. He looked up at her. You sure? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. They crossed the ravine cautiously. On the other side, the trees thickened, and the terrain dipped into a sloping basin of rock and brush. Colt slowed his horse to a stop, scanning the ridge above. He raised 2 fingers. Movement. Not loud. Not obvious. But there. A glint of metal, maybe the shine of a gun barrel. Wyan was off her horse in a heartbeat, crouched low. Colt followed. They left the animals and moved on foot through the brush, flanking the ridge. The climb was slow, slick from morning dew. Colt's side ached with every motion, but pain had become more friend than enemy now. At least it let him know he was still alive. Halfway up, they found a body. Lakota. Young. Throat slit. No burial. No honor. Wyan knelt beside him, placing 2 fingers over the boy's eyes, whispering a phrase too sacred for Colt to understand. Then she stood and kept walking. At the top, they reached the edge of a narrow bluff, and what they saw made Colt curse beneath his breath. Below them, hidden in the folds of a shallow valley, was a camp. Not Lakota. Not soldiers. Mercenaries. Tents in rows. Makeshift watch posts. Horses tied under pine cover. At least 24 men. Some laughed over whiskey bottles. Others cleaned rifles. One held a whip. At the center, a massive canvas tent stood taller than the rest. That's where the decisions were made. That's Harrow's command, Colt said. You know the camp layout? He nodded slowly. He used to run supply lines through the Rockies. Same arrangement. North side's weak. Less eyes. They figure no one's stupid enough to climb it. I'm stupid, Wyan said without blinking. Then I guess I'm suicidal. They waited until nightfall. Clouds moved in fast, blotting out the moon. The camp below flickered with torchlight and voices too loud for men who'd never truly been hunted. Colt and Wyan moved like shadows, sliding between tree trunks and boulders until they reached the base of the camp's northern slope. The climb was brutal. Jagged rock. Wet moss. Silent cursing. Colt slipped once. Wyan caught his arm without a word, her grip strong. They crested the hill and crouched in the brush, breath shallow. Colt whispered, "We need information." Wyan pointed at the perimeter guard, a skinny man chewing on jerky, half asleep on a barrel. She vanished. A minute later, she returned with the man's rifle, his map pouch and his boot. "He won't walk for a while," she said. Colt grinned despite himself. "Remind me never to fall asleep around you." Inside the map pouch was a crude drawing of the camp, supply lines, and, at the bottom, 3 names listed under pending transport. Wyan froze when she read the first. To Sunk. Colt looked at her. "Your brother." She nodded once. "They've got him alive. For now." Below, a horn blew twice. "Prisoner movement," Colt whispered. "They'll try to move them before dawn. Less chance of attack. Then we move faster." They split again. Colt slipped toward the east end of the camp, planting powder charges he'd carried since before Clayridge. Old habit. Leave a way out or a way to burn everything down. Wyan slid through the brush toward the prisoner holding tent. She didn't need to speak their language. She knew the way men moved when they were cruel. And she'd learned to move quieter than the wind when she needed to. She found the tent unguarded. Inside were 3 Lakota men, bruised and bound. One raised his head slowly. Wyan inhaled sharp. To Sunk. Older now. Beard thick. One eye swollen shut. But alive. She crept in, cut their bindings. He blinked at her, unbelieving. "Wyan," he rasped. "We leave," she whispered. "Now." Colt met them halfway back toward the ridge. The charges were set. To Sunk and the others moved slowly, but the fire in their steps was returning. Then a shot rang out. One of the mercs had woken. Gun raised. Colt shot first. Chaos erupted. Torches flared. Men shouted. Bells clanged. "Run!" Colt barked. Wyan led the prisoners back up the ridge. Colt stayed behind, buying time, picking off silhouettes as they emerged from tents. Another shot clipped his leg. He fell. Then rolled. Then hit the detonator. The east side of the camp went up in a roar of flame and splinters. Men screamed. Horses bucked. Tents collapsed. Colt limped up the ridge, blood smearing the dirt behind him. Two mercs gave chase. Wyan turned. Colt raised his pistol but couldn't steady his hand. Then, an arrow flew past him. And another. The mercs dropped. T'Sunk stood behind Wyan, bow still raised. "You didn't wait for me," he grunted. "You were slow last time too," Wyan replied. They hauled Colt over the ridge and down the far side. By morning, they had found a sheltered grove near a hot spring, steam curling through the branches. Colt lay by the fire, pale but conscious. Wyan sat beside him, pressing a cloth to his leg. "I've had worse," he muttered. "You say that too often." "Because it's true too often." She smirked faintly. T'Sunk approached, crouched beside them. He studied Colt. "You're the one they want. I'm the one who's tired of running." T'Sunk nodded slowly. "Then don't run anymore." They ate, rested, watched the sun rise through cracked clouds. Wyan leaned back on her elbows, eyes distant. "We can't just save one camp," she said. "Harrow won't stop." "No," Colt said. "But we don't need to fight him on his terms." "You have a plan?" Colt pulled out a small, leather-bound book from his coat. His old war journal. Inside, routes, contacts, signals, fallback points. Everything Harrow had once taught him. Everything he could now use. Wyan looked at the book, then at him. "You're turning his own war against him." "No," Colt said. "I'm ending it." She nodded, slow and sure. In the trees, the wind picked up. Thunder again. Not from the sky. From something waking inside both of them. A storm was coming. And this time, they'd be the ones to start it. A low mist curled across the earth like a second skin as dawn broke cold and colorless. The world was quiet, too quiet for what was coming. From the edge of the bluff, Colt watched the valley below stir to life, the enemy camp slowly rebuilding after the explosion days earlier. He could see fresh sentries posted, mercenaries tightening patrol lines. Harrow had survived. That much was certain. Behind Colt, the grove had become a war council. Wyan knelt in the dirt, drawing maps with a burnt stick. T'Sunk spoke in low Lakota, his voice calm, measured, commanding. The other survivors from the ruined camp, those who could still fight, sat close, listening. They were few, but each carried something fierce in their bones. Colt finally turned and approached, the limp in his leg a sharp reminder of time ticking down. "They're expecting us now," he said. "After the fire. After the bodies." "They're afraid," T'Sunk replied. "We saw it in their faces." "That's a weapon." "They have guns," one man said. "We have bows." "They have numbers," another added. Wyan glanced up, eyes hard. "They think we're ghosts. Let's prove them right." She looked to Colt. "The map?" He handed her his journal. She flipped to the worn page marked with red crosses. Supply roads, old shortcuts, troop tunnels Harrow used during winter campaigns. "There," she pointed. "The southern ridge. You said it was Harrow's fallback bunker." "Stone walls," Colt nodded. "Black powder. Old stores of ammunition. If we breach it, it all goes." A quiet murmur passed among the warriors. "He won't expect us to strike his foundation," T'Sunk said. "Only cowards build bunkers to hide in." "He's not a coward," Colt said. "He's worse. He thinks he's righteous." Wyan stood and faced the group. "Then let's show him what justice looks like." They moved before sunrise. The strike force was small, 7 in total. Colt, Wyan, T'Sunk, and 4 others who had lost too much to turn away now. They traveled light, wrapped in furs, weapons silent. Down from the ridge, through ravines where shadows swallowed their tracks. Colt carried 2 dynamite charges wrapped in oiled canvas. T'Sunk took point, bow drawn. Wyan moved beside Colt, her blade sheathed but fingers twitching near the hilt. Halfway down the pass, they spotted 2 sentries posted near a split in the rock face. Wyan raised her hand. They crouched, waited, then struck. Tsunk's arrow found the first guard's throat. Wyan lunged from the mist, her blade swift and silent. No sound. No warning. They pushed through. The southern ridge loomed before them, a scar of stone carved into the hillside. The entrance to the bunker was hidden behind crates of supplies and canvas tarp. Just as Colt remembered. It hadn't changed. But he had. He and Wyan crept forward, laid the charges at the base of the stone. Colt wired the fuses with practiced hands, every movement a memory. Each knot tied with ghosts whispering over his shoulder. They retreated to the ridge above. Tsunk raised his hand. A signal fire burned behind enemy lines, lit by one of the scouts who had infiltrated 2 days before. The diversion began. Below, confusion erupted. Men scrambled. Alarms rang. Harrow's lieutenants shouted orders. And in the middle of it all, the ridge exploded. A wave of fire tore through the bunker, throwing dirt and bodies skyward. Smoke choked the valley. Ammunition stores ignited like thunder rolling across the earth. Chaos took over. That was the cue. Wyan and the others surged down the slope. Screams followed. Arrows flew. Colts fired. Colt found himself face to face with one of Harrow's officers, Grant, the man who'd once taught him how to field strip a rifle blindfolded. Now he swung a saber like a butcher. Colt ducked. Fired once. Grant fell without a word. He didn't stop. The camp was collapsing. Fires spread fast, eating through canvas and fear alike. And then Harrow emerged. Still in his officer's coat, metals gleaming, hair gray but neatly combed, revolver in hand. He stood atop a crate and bellowed. "Hold the line. They're savages and deserters. Nothing more." Colt walked straight through the smoke toward him. Harrow spotted him. McCollin. The name was ice. Venom. You should have stayed dead. Colt raised his pistol. I tried. They fired at the same time. Colt's shot clipped Harrow's shoulder. Harrow's grazed Colt's ribs. Wyan tackled Harrow from the side. They went down hard. The gun flew from his hand. Wyan punched him once, then again. He spit blood. Sneered. You think this means anything? We'll always win. You can burn our camps, but we're the law. We write the books. You wrote mine in blood, she said. Then she drove her blade into his chest. It was not dramatic. It was not vengeful. It was necessary. Colt stood in the smoke, watching it all burn. The sun rose behind them, casting gold across the wreckage. Later, as the fires cooled and the valley fell silent again, Wyan knelt beside her brother and offered a prayer. Colt leaned against a broken wagon, his side still bleeding but his spirit still. Not healed, but still. Tsunk approached him. You could ride west. Cross the border. No one would follow. I know. But you won't. No. He looked toward Wyan, now helping lift survivors from debris. I don't think I can leave her. Tsunk grunted. Then don't. 3 days later, the valley had become something new. Not a battlefield. Not a grave. But a place of rebuilding. Warriors hammered wood. Women unpacked supplies. Children, the few that remained, ran between tents like sparks of something hopeful. Colt sat beside the fire, sharpening a blade. Wyan sat across from him, weaving a new braid in her hair. He watched her hands, steady and sure. Do you think they'll come again? He asked. She nodded. Men like that always do. And us. We'll be here. He looked out over the camp. I was a weapon once, he said. But I think I'd rather be a shield now. Wyan smiled softly. You've always been both, she said. The fire crackled between them, and for the first time in years, Colt felt warmth that didn't come from flames. Above them, the sky stretched wide and open. Beyond it, more storms would surely come. But for now? For now, the wind carried only the sound of laughter and hammers. And the world, just for a moment, felt like it could be rebuilt. One scar at a time.